Y a continuación vamos a poder escuchar a Dzevada Susko, que viene desde Bosnia, es la directora del Instituto Bosnio de Tradiciones Islámicas. La doctora Susko es además la primera mujer que ha tenido un cargo de este nivel en la comunidad islámica de Bosnia, según tengo entendido. Por favor.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Il Terzo Pilastro and Professor Emanuele De Glucasi for organizing this conference and particularly for organizing for us this amazing setting. And I hope that you will be able to focus on my lecture instead of the fishes here in the background. I will try to give you, in the following 15 minutes, hopefully not any longer, a Western Balkan perspective, the development of civil society and the role of women in the Western Balkans. The Western Balkans include Croatia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Kosovo, Macedonia, and Albania. So one of them is an EU country already, and the others are supposed to be members of the EU soon. Some general characteristics of the Balkan countries are their common communist past, their geographical location at the semi-periphery of Europe, their similar economic and social transitions, and their patriarchal heritage still today felt in all segments of these societies. Also, some Balkan countries have recently contained a striking number of latent conflicts, such as the aggression against Bosnia and Herzegovina, genocide, genocide of Bosnian Muslims and ethnic tensions in the region. The conflict around Kosovo's independence and Macedonia's name dispute with Greece. The Balkans' religious landscape is quite complex and multifaceted. Christians represent the most prominent religious group, Orthodox Christians and Catholics, and Islam came to the Balkans with the Ottomans, with the Ottoman Empire, and Muslims consist of distinct ethnic groups. We have Albanians, Bosniaks, Turks, Pomaks, Torbish, and Roma. And they adhere to different theological traditions, mostly Sunni Islam, Hanafi school of thought, but also Shia, Bektashi Muslims in Albania and Macedonia. Most Balkan Muslims live in Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Kosovo. So when it comes to women's activism and movements, it is towards the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th that we see women writing articles, poems, books, protesting, and requiring that their voices be heard. Also at this time, as throughout Europe, the first women's organizations began to appear in the Balkan countries. Between First World War and Second World War, we witnessed emergence of many women's groups, organizations, and movements, most of which were ethnically or religiously based, and often focusing on charitable work and traditional women's roles. Along with other Balkan women, Muslim women as well as started voicing their problems through groups and organizations at the beginning of the 20th century, and their focus in terms of women's issues was mostly on education of Muslim women and later their work. A Congress of Russian Muslim women in 1917 in Kazan voiced demands for equal rights, abolition of polygamy, and obligatory primary education for girls. These ideas influenced some Muslim women and men of the Balkans. After World War II, we find the Communist Party's official women's organizations in many of these countries. Communism addressed women's question from top-down perspective as a part of greater communist ideology of socialist equality, which viewed women's unequal status in society as part of the class issue. Women therefore gained equality before the law, the right to vote and work, and many other rights, but the implementation of which faced resistance, stemming from traditionally defined gender roles. The feminist movement also started being more active around the 1970s in Yugoslavia, which had more open borders compared to other countries in the communist bloc. However, the feminist approach was attacked for being bourgeois, and it claimed that the socialist emancipation of women only scratched the surface of gender relations, especially within the private sphere. During communism, the pressure on Muslim women to denounce their covering of the head was so strong that these practices, along with other practices related to religion in generally, were almost abolished from the public scene in the Balkans. And only after 1990s do we see its re-emergence. The change in political regimes from 1989 onwards led to changes throughout these societies in the Balkans. All these societies have seen the emergence of new political and economic regimes of democracy and the market economy, as well as the resurgence of religion in the public sphere after many years of socialism. Today, all of these countries are somewhere in the process of harmonization of their legislation with the EU legislative framework. They are all signatories to all major international human and gender equality documents like CEDAW, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination of Women, Beijing Declaration, and UN 1325 resolution. Also, all have constitutions and laws requiring gender equality and non-discrimination, as well as gender institutional state mechanisms to monitor the proper implementation of these rules. Women's civil society organizations, or NGOs, are today quite present and active. The quality of their work depends on their stable financing, expertise, and/or relations to other stakeholders like governmental sectors or policymakers. Many topics of women in the civil society in the Balkans are political participation. Female presence in political life ranges from 15 to 30%. Fight against domestic violence, fight against unpaid and unbalanced work, and promotion of gender-sensitive aspects of the economy, as well as raising awareness about general detachment from women's issues and demonizing narrative about feminism present in the region. Also, women's groups and organizations have advocated for a more humane approach to employees, nature, and animals, as well as other segments of life, society, and politics. Also, specific groups of women throughout the region suffer multiple discrimination based on their ethnic background, such as Roma women, or religious background, such as Muslim women wearing the headscarf. Women in the civil society scene have made a great impact on changes in the laws and policies relating to women, and are continuing to do so in different activities related to gender-sensitive approaches and gender equality, like gender-sensitive budgets or domestic violence, family laws, etc., but also on other aspects of human lives. Here, it is also important to mention that with the democratization process, we see a new form of organizations emerging. These are organizations that are inspired by faith, so-called faith-based civil society organizations. And such faith-based female organizations are emerging as well. Practicing Muslim women organize themselves in such a way quite often, and more than women of other religions. Muslim women of the Balkans face the same problems as other women, of course, but they also additionally struggle with their minority status in the Balkans, as well as issues related to the place of religion in secular societies. Problems that practicing Muslim women face is at least twofold. On the one side, they are struggling with the prejudice and anti-Muslim sentiments in their societies, especially if wearing the headscarf, since public expression of religion is a novelty to these countries after many years of socialism. Following the global trend of revival of religion, young Muslim women, like their counterparts worldwide, are re-embracing the practice of head covering, giving it new and fresh meanings, including piety, but also female autonomy and defiance of materialism. On the other hand, they are struggling with their own communities in terms of understanding the place and role of women in Islam, although such struggles are present in other religious communities as well. They are therefore often organized in formal and informal organizations and groups, but still not cooperating always very actively with secular organizations in their societies, although some positive changes are visible. The main focus of their work is on informal education, empowerment of women, and improvement of Islamic knowledge. Positive example is the existence of some successful Muslim women's organizations such as Edu Nisa in Macedonia, Shokata Kulturore Grujaja in Albania, or Nahla in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I'm as well involved as the member of the assembly. At the same time, they are re-examining and reinterpreting the position of women in Islam, proving with their work and engagement that civic and religious identities are not mutual exclusive, but rather complementary. And when it comes to the institutional presence of Islam, we need to say that most Balkan Muslims are hierarchically organized under the official institution of the Islamic community, which organizes the religious life of Muslims in each respective country, headed by a mufti or grand mufti. And I will shortly offer you the example of the Islamic community in Bosnia. Muslim women attend the mosques for prayers and other religious activities and rituals regularly. Also, Muslim women have been gaining secondary and university level Islamic education. But women are not for years having any active role in decision-making processes or positions. However, in the last 3-4 years, we see some serious changes in this regard. Women are more encouraged to be involved on the mosque boards and the assembly, the top-level representative body of believers. Previously, in the last mandate, we had 5 women representatives. Now, in the new mandate, we have 11. And women are slowly as well being appointed at leading and decision-making positions in the community, such as the new director of the Research Institute. We have a new editor who is as well a woman. The president of the Human Rights Commission within the Islamic community is as well a woman. We have a library, a public relations officer who is as well a woman, professors, teachers, assistants, journalists, all of them practicing Muslim women. And for the first time, a department for women and families being established in order to work on gender mainstreaming and other gender-sensitive issues. So it remains for us to inspect closely their work and systemic interventions that will be made in this regard. And let me, at the end, go back to general framework of women in the civil society. Having in mind all these things said, that there are 3 important segments I chose to mention to you today, since I believe you in your countries feel them as well. Firstly, a most common thread present in all women's organizations in the Balkans is engaged anti-militarism. Women and women's organizations in the Balkans have played and are playing a vital role in the peacemaking and peace-building processes in our countries. Some were at the forefront of anti-war protests and continued to be very vocal throughout the war and after it, such as Women in Black. Women and women's organizations were the first to cross the war lines and initiate the rebuilding of the societies. Until today, our women's organizations remain dedicated to anti-war projects and activities, as well as implementation of UN 1325 resolution. And this is, I believe, true for other women elsewhere as well. Secondly, a phenomenon of feminization of the civil society is present in the Balkan countries as well. Women's participation in the civil society scene is much more prominent and active than in some other segments of the society. Without systemic barriers and challenges, women tend to go more into the civil society sector and work or engage there more than, for example, in the political sphere. The problem with this is that civil society work is often less paid and less secure. Therefore, there is a need for detailed analysis of the effects that this has their work at negotiating positions. I believe this is something we all here share. And thirdly, the quality of the work of these organizations depends on their knowledge and expertise, but also on the funds. Therefore, the phenomenon of donor-driven work and donor-driven projects is also very present. Most organizations, in order to survive, have to go for projects that will be favored by the donors. Especially regarding gender issues, these donors are not always aware of the context or the needs of our specific countries, and very often are promoting one specific view of gender empowerment, mostly Western liberal individualist type. Whereas this is not bad, sometimes it is not allowing for more traditional empowerment strategies to be used, or genuine indigenous solutions closer to the mentality of our women to be implemented for the same goal. I also believe that this is something that we all have in common. In conclusion, I believe that there are many commonalities amongst our countries, that some of the trends and concepts are the same or similar. I would firstly like to invite us all to celebrate what has already been achieved, because a lot has been accomplished in the last 100 or so years. We need to admit that this has been achieved by the strength and advocacy of many brave women, but also men. The men often tacitly approve of things, maybe not standing in the first rows, but without our male friends, fathers and brothers who supported our education or advancement or decisions at one point or another, these things would also not be possible. What we need is a broad scope, systemic cooperation of women and men, of people of different, not only religions, but worldviews, living in our countries. People who will be sensitive to gender needs and gender differences, and who will respect other people's choices, even if these are not their own. Civil society organizations need to work with other stakeholders, state gender mainstreaming mechanisms, and religious communities in order to provide for a lasting and sustainable system of gender-sensitive laws, policies, and strategies in the Western Balkans and Mediterranean countries that will be made according to our own contexts and development needs, and not someone else's agendas. Thank you very much.